Hello there, SCT friends. In the winter issue, we showed you the 10 most wanted products, and one of them was the Love Big Word die from LDRS Creative. And I am playing with it today to create a layout and a card. I'm going to show you what this die can do. I have a big stack of paper here that matches my background paper. I'm going to create a really cool tone on tone effect. Now this layout does require a bit of time, but I promise you that the effects are so worth it. So in addition to the white background paper that I have, I cut up another piece and a half of basil white cardstock to 3 by 4 1/4. So just 3 by 4 1/4 inch pieces. And all I'm doing is repeating die cutting the big word love die over and over again on these small pieces. If you go ahead and cut out your pieces that just fit the die beforehand, your process goes a lot faster. So you can see there how nice and clean that comes out in my Spellbinders machine here. So I'm going to speed up this process so that you can see just how easy this is. It's really just a rinse and repeat, rinse and repeat. I'm using some ThermoWeb Pixie tape there to hold my die in place on each piece of paper, running it through my Spellbinders machine. And it couldn't be any simpler. You could put on a podcast, you could put on a YouTube video, and go to town doing this step. So once I have all of those done, I'm going to cut a frame. So I'm going to make my white background 11 by 11, and I'm going to frame that with a piece of purple cardstock. And that's because my daughter's wearing purple in this photo, and I always choose colors from my photo. I let my photo kind of tell me what color story we're going to go with. This is when I start placing my dies. Now, a little tip for you guys, if you have any extra pieces of white cardstock, left over that are not the size that you were using for the full pieces, go ahead and die cut those because you're going to have pieces on the edges of your paper that do not have the full word on there. And you definitely want to start in the center when you're laying this out, so that your die cut words go all the way to the edge and off the edge of the paper. It kind of makes them look more like pattern paper, but with more dimension and with more texture. Once I get everything laid out in a visually pleasing way, I'm going to grab my scrapbook.com smart glue and a little poking tool so that I can poke out those little dots at the top of each letter. This is an important step because it just adds an extra touch there, and you want to have some kind of sharp tool to poke those out. So the next step again is a rinse and repeat. Just poke and glue and press down. It's really, really simple. Again, put on your favorite album, podcast, Netflix series, and go to town. The next step we're going to take is just trimming off all the edges. I like to use a mat and a really sharp X-Acto blade for this one with my stainless steel ruler from We Are Memory Keepers. This is the easiest way I find to do this and to get a nice straight edge. Once I clear away all the debris, I have this beautiful tone-on-tone textured background with the word love all over. And I have a photo of my children sized at 4 by 6. That's a portrait photo. So I have 3 die-cut love words left over. I'm going to stack those and create the title. But I want to use the shadow die that's also included with the big word die to add a colorful shadow behind it so that it stands out from that background. First, I'm going to choose the pattern papers that I want to map my photo with, and I want it to be slightly playful. I'm going to mix and match some patterns here. So the most important thing to me is that I'm changing some colors, that I'm changing the size of those patterns. You can see there I flipped the purple one to get the larger scale pattern instead of the smaller one because the teal is smaller. And then I'm choosing this multicolor pattern for the back layer so that I can tie the teal and the purple and the blues that I'm going to be using on this page together. I always like to have a piece of pattern paper that ties everything together, and that one at the back, that floral, is definitely the one. So I'm placing my teal slightly askew. I'm going to place my purple straight, and I'm going to use just a small piece of that floral in the background, and I'm going to put that one straight as well. Once I find a place that I like for my pattern papers, I generally hold them in place while I tape them together. So foam tape from Scrapbook Adhesives by 3L is going to make sure my photo is elevated off the page just like my title is going to be. And I adhere the rest of my papers with my scrapbook.com tape runner there. So now that I have everything in place on my background, I'm going to go ahead and adhere this to the frame. Really love the way that this looks already. It's so pretty. I wish you could see it in person. It has so much pretty texture to it. And this cardstock is textured cardstock, so it adds to that texture even more. Next, I am going to glue those 3 die cuts that I have left over together to make those like a thicker piece of almost like a cardstock, a thick cardstock die cut. You can do this as many times as you like. The more layers you have, the more it's going to pop off the page, but it will be a little bit trickier to get it in your page protector. So I like 3 there because there's already 1 behind it. I'm making sure to line that up on 1 already on the background. And I found this perfect paper. So all of the papers that I'm using today are from the LDRS Creative Lovely Watercolor 6x6 paper pad. This one has that pretty purple and blue together, and it's like a watercolor textured background, and it just looks absolutely beautiful when stacked on that die. I for a moment thought about adding some ink around the edge of that love word, but I really wanted to keep it clean and simple and pretty, but that watercolor behind really makes it special. So I'm going to go ahead and adhere that to the shadow layer. Love that so much. And I pulled my photo mat over to the left so that those could be touching. I love when the larger elements of my layout are touching each other so that they form kind of a connection, a visual connection together. So I'm just pulling that photo mat even closer to my title. Isn't that so pretty already? There's not much more we need to do to this layout to get it done. Along with the big word love in the die from LDRS Creative, you also have an ampersand, the word you, forever, and always. So for this layout, I'm finishing my title by cutting out the word you in that nice script 3 times from navy paper. I want it to stand out against that watercolor background. So I'm using navy, a nice deep color, and I'm die cutting that 3 times again, and I'm going to layer those die cuts to add that word you to my title. If you thought that sentiments like this were only meant for cards, you can definitely think again, because you can see here that these make such a perfect title for my layout. So once the title is in place, it's time for me to pull out some embellishments, and I'm using the One Fine Day embellishment pack from LDRS Creative. It is a beautiful selection of different phrases, tags, journaling spots, and just cute little elements like bees and florals and bunnies, and I'm kind of going to town here. I am framing my photo with 3 different areas of embellishment. So I'm grouping these embellishments to try to keep them tight against my photo, because I don't want to cover up that background that I painstakingly created and that I love so much. So we're just placing a few strategic flowers. We're kind of moving the colors around the photo, the purples and the teals and the blues. I really love this collection pack. It's so pretty. It goes with the watercolor designs in that 6x6 paper pad really beautifully. So if you're looking for some spring embellishments, some spring papers, definitely check out the lovely watercolors and the One Fine Day embellishments. Okay, so it's time for me to commit to the U on my title there. And I wanted to do that before I place my embellishments down so that I could be sure that none of them were going to cover that U. I really like those sweet bees. This photo was taken in May, so kind of a springtime day here in Chicago, not yet summer. And so they really are perfect. And the bunny, I mean, I just had to use the bunny because he's really cute, and my kids are kind of like my little bunnies. So I thought it was appropriate there to use that. I love adding these flowers to kind of soften the squareness of that corner. So I used 3 flowers there. I'm going to tuck this one underneath that corner to kind of soften that. That purple tag is going to hold my journaling. I always love to use journaling spots because it gives my journaling a home. And I put my little pencil line there because I do print my journaling. So I'll scan in that tag. But then I decided to straighten my tag, so I'm going to have to change my pencil spot there. You can see here that all of these embellishments, they don't take away from the photo, they actually accent it, draw your eye to the photo even more. The last thing I'm going to add are some enamel dots, and these are just some old ones I had in my stash from our friends at Altenew, but the colors match beautifully, so I'm going to add 7 of those just around my embellishment groupings. Again, you don't want to draw your eye away from that photo, so kind of keep everything tight to your photo on a layout like this. Okay, since I have so many of these negative die cuts left, I thought it was appropriate to create a card. So I grabbed 3 of them, and I grabbed 3 that were the straightest ones I could find. And I am layering them up and making sure I'm just pressing them together, pressing the edges together to make sure that they are evenly lined up. So what you want to do in this case is just make sure your straightest piece is on the top, because then you can trim what's behind it from there. So before you throw away those negative die cuts, think about what else you could do with them. You could create a shaker. In this case, I'm just going to create a really simple and easy card instead of a shaker today, but a shaker would be great to create if you had a bit more time. So you can see here that I am just trimming off that edge that wasn't quite straight. Sorry about my head there. Just getting these lines nice and straight, because when I put it on my A2 card, you'll definitely notice if something is off. So I also want to add the negative space in the O and the V. So just making sure that I have all three of those around here on my desk and gluing those together too with my smart glue from scrapbook.com. There we go. Then I'm going to take that teal paper that I used on the layout again, but I'm going to add another paper, this purple, for my card background. I really like the way that they look together. I tried out a few different combinations and I finally settled on these two because I do want it to coordinate with my layout. I could go a totally different direction here and use pinks and purples or pinks and greens, but when I'm creating a card after a layout, I like to keep it simple and not recreate the wheel. I'll just go with the same colorway that I used before. So then I'll just adhere the center of the O and the center of the V right there. And that's so cute. I love the floral background on there, and you can't tell, but there's 3 layers on there. So it's really lovely and dimensional. So I cut a piece of scrap paper to an A2 size, so that's 4 1/4 by 5 1/2. And I'm just kind of mapping out what I'm going to do here. Again, I'm going to keep this really simple. Use that purple pattern paper from the lovely watercolor 6x6 paper pad, and then put my sentiment on top of that. Again, I tried a different colorway and I decided to just go with the purple, keep it simple. So I cut that to an A2 size. I'm just layering that up here. I typically like to create card fronts because they're easier to store, and then when it's time for me to send them, I just pop them on a folded card base. So then I'm using some scrapbook adhesives, foam tape to add some more dimension there. So this is one of those cards that you would want to hand deliver or pay a bit of extra postage for. And then I'm going to pop a few florals on here, just 3. I like to create a little triangle for those florals typically so that my sentiment is in the center. And the last thing I need to do is die cut the end of my sentiment. And you can see on my completed card here that I added a darker teal U to complete my sentiment and just a few sequins. This card was so easy to create because I already had those die cuts on hand and I just did some layering. So let's go back to that layout that started off this whole process using our 10 Most Wanted Big Word Love die from LDRS Creative. Not only did I create a beautiful title with this die, I also created a layered textural tone-on-tone background that really made this layout special. After that, it didn't really need much, just a few pretty pattern papers from the LDRS 6x6 paper pad and some beautiful embellishments. I love this page. I hope it inspires you guys to pull out your dies and check out the LDRS Creative Big Word Love die and the other dies in this series to create not only cards, but layouts, mini albums, and more. Thanks so much for watching, and be sure to check out the other videos we have for you today. Happy creating!